enormous difficulties and weaknesses, as Ambassador Kamal very rightfully suggests, in the law. Just basic definitions. There is no agreed definition of what a space weapon is. Anything in space could be used as a weapon. It's all dual use. If you take a harmless meteorological satellite and ram it into something else, you have a space weapon. So it's very, very hard to define what a space weapon is. It's even hard to define what the limit of outer space is. There's countries that disagree over that. The Outer Space Treaty requires that your work be limited to peaceful purposes. Well, some countries regard nuclear deterrence as peaceful because it maintains, it prevents you from being attacked. So that's a peaceful purpose. So there's a lot of difficult, sticky terms that make it very difficult to have right now a consensus on international law. I want to wrap this up because I know you have a lot of questions, but there are a lot of different competing options available for where the world community can go from here. It's like we're on a superhighway and we've got 8 different exit ramps that we can take, and all of them lead to completely different destinations and could very well determine the future of our planet in some ways. One is simply an agreement on what are called rules of the road, or a code of conduct, where you have a group of states get together and say, okay, when we go into space, we're going to act as follows. And they make political commitments that are totally voluntary and non-binding. This is a very, very popular idea right now, and it's being explored by the UK and by an organization in Washington, D.C. called the Stimson Center, which has been championing this for a long time. That's called Rules of the Road, or Code of Conduct. On the other hand, there's an effort in Geneva at the Conference on Disarmament, which is a UN-related entity, to try to see if they could negotiate a treaty that will actually outlaw weapons in space. Russia and China have long been trying to pursue a ban on the prevention of an arms race in outer space, known as PAROS, P-A-R-O-S. And last year, they introduced a draft treaty with a very, very, very long name. I think the long name goes into outer space. It's called the Treaty on the Prevention of the Placement of Weapons in Outer Space and the Threat or Use of Force Against Outer Space Objects. And it goes by the acronym PPWT. And this is a legally binding multilateral treaty that would prohibit the placement of any kind of weapon, any kind, not just weapons of mass destruction, any kind of weapon in outer space. Now, the great problem with this treaty, aside from the difficulties of defining all these terms, is that it does not cover space weapons that are based on Earth. If you shoot a laser beam from the Earth to space, if you launch an anti-satellite missile from an aircraft, it's not covered by this treaty. And since China just recently tested an ASAT weapon based on those principles, there have been a lot of criticisms about this treaty, that it's conveniently designed to prohibit certain kinds of weapons while allowing some countries to still maintain their anti-satellite capabilities. So there's a lot of discussion and debate. In other words, I'm trying to get across here, there is no consensus yet in the world community on what to do. All right, wrapping this up, we have to take into consideration also what critics have said about efforts to establish laws for space. They have said, you'll never get agreement on definitions. They have said, you'll never get it verified. It's impossible to verify. They'll say that you'll never completely get countries to agree on it because weak countries will always want to have the right of shooting at satellites, because that is the only thing they can do to fight a superior military enemy who relies a lot on satellites. It's a form of asymmetrical warfare. It's hopeless to think you'll ever convince weak states to ever give up their right to defend themselves that way. This is what critics say. They say that, as Rumsfeld said, that the better approach is not to ban the weapons, but to defend satellites better and to use deterrence, namely threaten military attacks on any country that jeopardizes satellites. And also critics say that if you break these rules, nothing happens. There's no sanctions, there's no penalties, there's no way of enforcing it. So as a result, all of this is a total waste of time. We should not spend time trying to design laws. The final argument, of course, is that there is no arms race in outer space. This is a classic argument. They say that that there are no space weapons that are based in outer space, therefore why do we need a treaty for it? Now there are strong rebuttals to each one of these arguments. I won't go through them right now, but I did want to, in my remarks this morning, give you an overview of the history of some of these concepts, how it relates to international law, how technology is pushing the frontiers of law. The self-interests of states are undergoing great redefinition right now, and the world does not agree on what to do, but they do agree on one thing, and that they're facing an enormous challenge in the years ahead. So I think on that point I'll stop and we can open up for discussion.
Thank you very much. Basically, you are a very depressing person because instead of giving any solutions, you are just making life even more miserable for us. What you have said is that it is a jungle, that from time to time there is ad hoc treaties, but none of them are verifiable because of the definitions. And so it's not really rule of law at all. Now the consequence of that depressing statement is that it is in our interest not to regulate outer space, because obviously we are in some sort of an attempt to have a race in outer space. And so I do not want to allow other countries to constrict my ability to be strong in outer space. And therefore I do not want treaties. And that seems to be the end of the problem, because I'm not going to allow treaties which will constrict the use of outer space. I want to have an advantage in outer space. And so you're going to have willy-nilly an arms race in outer space, or an advantage race in outer space. The only other point I wanted to ask you was that, you know, we have these days on television, you have Mission Impossible, in which the tape self-destructs after 5 seconds. This concept of self-destruction is built into our environmental theory, and that is what is called biodegradability. We don't like plastics which don't biodegrade. We want to do something about the biodegradation of nuclear fuel waste. Is it possible to have some sort of an agreement that the junk in outer space, or the fragments that you refer to, and when you talk of 1 centimeter, that is the size of a bullet. Yeah. And so can we have some sort of biodegradability, or is that not possible at all in outer space? That's the only question I want to ask you before we open.
Well, in some ways, you can have it's not technically what you'd call biodegradable in the sense that we use it on Earth, but you have this wonderful thing called gravity. And if you have something in low Earth orbit, even if it's only a little 1 centimeter, eventually those things are going to come back into the atmosphere and burn up on their re-entry. But sometimes it takes a long time for those particles and space junk to come back down and re-enter. Now as I said, in 2007, the Chinese ASAT test was up at 850 miles. That's quite a long way up there. It's almost at the edge of what's called a low Earth orbit. And those debris, it's going to take a really long time for those pieces to come down, or if you want to think of it like biodegrading, to reach down and to come back into the atmosphere and burn up. It's very, very seldom that these 4 and 5 inch parts, when they come back into the environment, actually reach Earth. They are destroyed in the process of reorbiting. But anyway, that's about as close as you can get.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll take questions, starting with 2 questions from Metro. We'll take the 2 questions and answer them jointly from this end.
Thank you, Ambassador. I do need to inform you that we've lost Lockhaven. We think it was Klingons. We're not 100% sure, but we will not have questions from Lockhaven. And I would ask each of the individuals asking questions to identify themselves.